Welcome to Core Voices, your space to talk about the hard-hitting issues that move you, that strike you, that trouble you, the things that you've never been able to talk about. That's what we're here for. The core voice that sits within each of us. It's time to release that. It's time to reach out and build community, build connection by connecting with each other's hearts, to know that we're not alone. Everything we go through, others have been through too. And we're hoping that that's what we'll be able to achieve through this community of core voices. Don't forget to reach out to us on the website, www.corevoices.org. Reach out to us on Instagram and Facebook. Click that like button and help support us to do the work that we're trying to do to reach more people that need that support. Let this be your space. Drop us an email, corevoices@gmail.com. Let us know what topics you want to have us talking about, or if you want to recommend or suggest a guest, please make this your space. Get involved and let's talk about everything that we should be talking about and take away this veil of taboos. Today, I am very excited to share this space with one of my beautiful sisters who is magnificent in so many ways. Kalbir Bains, with tremendous courage, she has broken through so many taboos. She's transcended from victim to advocate for those suffering from domestic abuse, including honor-based violence, girl abortion, and dowry abuse. She is the author of an incredible book called Not Our Daughter, the true story of a daughter-in-law. It's also been turned into a short film, and through telling her story, Kalbir gives others the courage to break through a veil of shame, which disempowers the abusers. As a volunteer for the Sharan Project, Kalbir educates the younger generation on honor-based abuse and encourages them not to suffer in silence. She's also changing public policy by educating CPS, police forces, and health workers. Her work is chipping away at the cycles of abuse, and it is my absolute pleasure and honor to have her in this space with us today. So please join me in welcoming Kalbir.
Hi, Jaspreet. Thank you very much for having me on Core Voices.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here and for joining us. I'm really excited for everything that you're going to be sharing with us today.
Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. And I don't know how many of our viewers and listeners have met you or know much about your work. So if you wouldn't mind starting by giving us just a little bit of background about yourself so we can get to know you a little bit more.
Sure. I'm an author of a book called Not Our Daughter, The True Story of a Daughter-in-Law, which is just there, and if everybody can see it, there you go. And I decided to write this book about 6 years ago, and it was down to my mum and my naniji, which for me, I've come from a family where my mum's a divorcee in the early 90s. And then myself, I went through a divorce when 2009 myself. And what I noticed was during that time of going through a divorce in 2009, as well as my mother going through one in the early 90s, not much had changed from then to now, and how women were still like ostracized out within the community, how divorce was still looked down upon on women more than men. So I didn't feel there was much difference between then and now. So what I decided to do was I wanted to break that cycle. And then also I had a nanny who was pre-partition. So was born in Pakistan, obviously they'd settled in India. And then my mum as an immigrant. So my nanny was in the refuge camp in Pakistan. You've got my mum who was an immigrant in the UK. I also saw these women had sacrificed so much just so I could have an education and I could actually live a better quality of life, which I was doing because I was a fashion designer for a brand at the time at the top, and where I was working for Marks and Spencer's. And I was doing everything thanks to these women that had sacrificed a lot more before me for me to have the opportunities I had. And I kind of felt where, they've sacrificed so much, but yet going forward, even though they've sacrificed so much, me being educated, there is no discrimination when it comes to going through a divorce or domestic abuse or any form of abuse. There's no stigma that just because you're educated, you're less likely to go through that process. So, and I think I realized that when I looked back at my the women before me, like my mum, my nanny, and the sacrifices they'd made. And I just made a decision that day that I want to actually voice my opinion on this journey, talk about some of the hardship I'd gone through, rather than, you know, kind of close up, as we're taught to Punjabi women, to just close up and not talk about it, you know, the sharam and loka ne ki kehna hai, that kind of whole thing. So for me, it was almost wanting to educate the community rather than hide away from it. And that's where I decided to start on writing my journey. And, you know, so it's inspired by my story as well as my mum's journey back in the 90s. Also looking at, so there's a small chapter of looking at how women have struggled during partition as well. And again, what marriage was seen back then as honor. You know, during partition, I've heard stories from my Naniji where, you know, women were given poison when they were leaving their family homes to go over to Punjab, because obviously that was the journey that they took from Pakistan to Punjab. And, you know, they packed up as many kapde as they could in a joli. And in this joli, they picked one best outfit. And that best outfit was going to be their wedding outfit. Little did they know until at the time when they were getting married. So, you know, everything around a woman is measured by her getting married. No matter how many achievements you may succeed, how many awards, how many degrees you'll get, until you're not married, you're not measured to something. And when a marriage fails, then you're seen as nothing in the community, I feel. And that was my experience and my mother's. My nanny wasn't a divorcee. My Nanaji passed away. And again, she explained that journey of being married to him and the honor it was during a partition to marry your daughters and to have a man's shadow to protect you was such an, again, that was seen as like your highest achievement you could have achieved during those times. So for me, you know, just understanding the women, I took a trip 10 years ago back to Punjab, which I'd been a number of times before, but this time it was like a special trip because I knew I was going to be going from Punjab, crossing the border by foot to Pakistan, understanding my nanny's heritage and, you know, diving into a bit more history on my family. And as I did this, I also started to pay attention at the law in Punjab and Pakistan and seeing how women are treated. And as I was out there, I realized, yes, I'm the privileged one here because we've got a lot of the law that takes, you know, because we're UK born with being British citizens, Asian British. You've got a lot of, you know, we've got a lot of rights, a lot more than what my mother had in India, a lot more than what my nanny had in Pakistan. So a lot of women's stories have been forgotten during partition because none of those voices were spoken. Nobody chose to write those or document them unless there's now, you know, projects that have gone about to write women's stories. A lot more stories have come from the men. And then you've got with women in Punjab, now when you go to weddings and functions, say if the wedding didn't go ahead, something happened, a woman has more rights to illegally sue her in-laws out there, yet future in-laws to be, yet she hasn't even married. But then we haven't got those policies here, I noticed. So I was thinking, I was almost comparing the policies whilst I was out on this trip and also looking at the way women were treated. So when I was in Punjab, I noticed being on a rickshaw and people were just staring at you, gulping at you. You go into shops and, you know, you see things that you don't normally see. Then I went to Pakistan and again, they had parde on the side, like blinds on the side of the rickshaws. Women never queued anywhere. Women got to go in, whereas the men were queuing. So for me, I think as I'm seeing this and I'm seeing it for myself, I took away all this research and I thought, right, I came back and I decided I'm going to write this book. And I started diving in it off and on because I had a few things going on in my personal life where I could dive and spend 6 months into it, or I could just step away from it. There was no deadline with it. And as I've gone into doing this, I've discovered so much about my family history and the process of it from my mum's side, from my dad's side. Again, I didn't even realize I had a second auntie until I was writing the book. I didn't realize how many child marriages had happened within my family, as well as the community, forced marriages. And, you know, as you dive in, I was discovering so much. And I decided then how I'm going to start this is by writing about my journey when I got married. From there, diving into my mum's journey, diving into my nanny's a bit. And I learned so much and I took more away from this, I feel, than anything else. So at the time, my sort of was like, my thinking process was, I just want 1% of change within the South Asian community, our community, our Punjabi community. I just want them to change the way they think, the way weddings are going on right now, because weddings were getting bigger and bigger and bigger. But yet we've got very high divorce rate in the UK. So what are we doing within the Gurdwaras to support the couples, to want to make, the marriages work, and making them understand what Anand Karaj is? We're all about the parties and all about impressing our guests, and our guest lists are getting bigger and bigger. So for me, it was like all these things were adding up. And I just wanted to kind of get a better understanding, and hoping when I started this project, I get 1% change. That's all I wanted, was 1% change. I ended up getting a lot more than I bargained for. And with Guruji's Kirpa, I've got to say, like, can I be honest, even when I did my first event or anything, even when I launched the book, I launched it with EY Sikh Network. And I remember when I went in the room, which obviously this is before anyone has turned up in the room, I didn't ask. And that's one of the things, the beauty of it, and you can see that in my book when you get the book and you read it. My nanny has played a very strong role in my life, and she is nothing but lives and breathes a Gurbani. And the Path has been part of our lifestyle. And so even when you've gone through an Uki Kari, you recite your Mul Mantar and you go through those processes and you feel like connected to God as one. So when I was writing it, there was just elements that, like taking me back to my childhood with my nanny, the moments when she used to come over from Canada to visit us, through to my mum when she was struggling with my dad and they were going through a divorce. And I remember we never went to Godhra as a family because we got ostracized by the community and the way the women were looking at my mum, but yet we did Bart at home. So it just got me to start reflecting on things. And like I said, I paid attention at the law. And then I came back and I looked at our UK law and I thought, do you know what? There's so much going on here, but yet the laws we haven't got in place for when it comes to weddings. Because even though we say we don't do this, but there is a part of a gender thing. In the UK, there's a rivaj where the girl side will cover the cost. But as time has gone on, both couples will contribute to a wedding. But in my case, when I got married, I contributed for the wedding. It was like the grunch of the cost was on my side of the family. So again, I found that very, like, the inequality there not fair as well, because why is it? But then, the girl side have to cover the cost. And again, you look back into history, Sagan and things like that, was given to their daughters. Parents gave, jewelry or sets and things to their daughters because women never used to work back in the days. So they'd used to rely on whatever their parents have given them as dowry, that they're going to, if something was to, God forbid, happen to their husbands, they can rely on that salary and run their households. But obviously, with time going on, women have become more stronger. We're working class now as well. So you've got women are working as well as men are. We're contributing to a household together. So you've got that going on, the dynamic. So I just saw loads of changes from when my nanny, again, that generation shut up and put up with it. And my mum did, because they were living off of their husbands. Their husbands were the breadwinners at home. Mm-hmm. Whereas though, when I was married with myself and my partner, I had professional jobs. And both of us contributed towards running of a home. So you have choices as well. So if there's certain things you're not going to put up with, people tend to walk away from marriages quicker, I think. But with my situation, I didn't just walk away. I went through marriage counselling. I even had counselling through with the family before I made the decision to walk away. Mm-hmm. And I think afterward, when I came out, I thought, what services have we got within our own community? Mm. And as I reached out, I realized we haven't got any community. We haven't got anything that, within our Gurdwara, we promote weddings. Overall, there's all these Asian exhibitions, but we've got no counselling professional services within our religious buildings to support couples when they have a breakdown or they have a problem, and to keep it professional. Mm-hmm. So I started diving into that, and there was like a number of things were just boiling up. There were so many things coming to the surface. And I actually then made a decision that I'm going to start writing the story, and I hope I get 1% change. Like I was saying, I got more. I ended up launching with EY Sikh Network. From the respond I had from there, it went on to me. I'd applied to do a TED Talk. I did the TED Talk. From the TED Talk, I went on to talking at a number of like West Midlands Police, My first actual official talk of the book was West Midlands Police. Through
Wow.
that presentation I did with the West Midlands Police, there was an officer called Tony Parker, who was from the domestic violence unit in Wolverhampton.
Mm-hmm.
And he'd heard the conversation. He said, and I focused on that conversation more about, in weddings, we give sugan to our daughters, and again, bringing it back to dowry.
Mm-hmm.
It's not sugan when your daughter's future in-laws are asking for jewelry or asking for a list to be compiled for a wedding. And that's what I had happen in my personal situation, where they kept compiling lists and bringing forward and saying, we need this, we need this. And the wedding ended up going from 350 people to 550 to a different venue, to all these issues that were happening before the wedding. And I had chose 3 months before the wedding to walk away. And then I thought, I've got to make it work. And I carried on thinking of the shame of what the shame's going to be on my mum being a divorcee. And I chose to continue with that relationship. And again, their fear was, what if we don't give the things that they're asking for? Will they make your life a hell? And I kept thinking that kind of behavior happens in India, not in the UK. And, so again, going back to that conversation with like them asking for things, as I'm talking about it, that is dowry abuse. You're using a word called sugan and asking for things, when if you look at, again, the Sikhi Reet, and in there it's forbidden to give dowry for your daughters to get married. It's seen as selling your daughters. And when I really paid attention and I reflected back on that behavior, and I thought, actually, for them to be asking for things, and my family worrying now that everybody knows in the community that we're fixed up and we're arranged, and the shame it's going to bring on my family more than his family because my mom's a divorcee. It just pressure that gets put on the girl side. I really paid attention through my wedding and other weddings that I saw where I went, where yet the girl side are paying for it, but they're always sat in the background, and the boys side are always put on the forefront. And it's always putting them. And it was, again, these little behavior patterns that I didn't agree with, which I chose to then start writing. So I've covered a lot of subjects in the book about, cost of weddings, dowry abuse. You've got domestic abuse, alcohol abuse, and it's talking about real issues that go on behind closed doors, basically. I think I've gone on, by the way, mate.
No, not at all. I love everything that you're sharing with us, and I think that there's so much that's so important. I'm really grateful that you've put together this book, because it's so many things you're saying resonate with me, and I'm sure that everybody who's catching this episode, who's tuning in, feels the same way, because a lot of these things are so common in our culture, in our community. We've normalized them, and they shouldn't be normal. That shouldn't be okay. That shouldn't be just what happens. Unfortunately, it has been that way. And I think that doing the work that you're doing is incredible, to raise awareness to it, because that gives us the opportunity collectively to step in and create something that's better, that's different to the broken system that was given to our parents, to our mothers, or to our grandparents, Hannah. I can't wait to read the book, and I want everybody who's listening, who's tuning in, to get over to Amazon, to type in Not Our Daughter, The True Story of a Daughter-in-Law by Kalbir Bains, and please show your support. Buy 5 copies, give them out to your friends, share it with everybody, because we only can make a difference once we're sharing our stories. And I'm just like, I'm so engrossed in everything that you were saying. There's like a billion questions in my head. And please only answer if you're comfortable. But I think that for me, a topic that is immediately relatable is divorce, right? And that word itself is so tabooed and labeled with shame, right? That we become untouchable, right? So technically, you and I are both divorcees, right? And that means that in the community, we get shoved into that dirty, dusty corner full of cobwebs, and nobody's ever going to speak to us again, because that's how it used to be, right? So apparently that's supposed to be what happens to us. I don't agree with that.
Oh. So when I've done a talk at a number of events, there's a charity called ICRA Charity. And just to let you know as well, guys, on when you purchase the book, what happens is you end up, there's a percentage that's being donated to a charity called the Sharan Project, which I volunteer for the charity. So it's a women's
again?
The Sharan Project.
The Sharan Project.
The Sharan Project, and it's an organised which supports vulnerable women and building their lives back up. And right now, with COVID happening, it's, as everybody knows, domestic abuse has been on the rise worldwide by 46%. So, you know, yourself, they've got like ICRA, Karma Nevada, the Sharan Project, all these South Black Sisters, all these charities are helping women that need it, as well as men as well that do go through abuse as well. A smaller percentage, but they do. What was I saying? Sorry, that this divorce. Yeah. So ICRA, when I've gone to events and I've done, and this, I'm going to use the little quote that they use. Women are like silk. If you throw them in mud, they stain. Men are like gold. You throw them in mud and you can just wash it off.
Oh.
So it really doesn't matter what men do. And even if it is, and this is the thing, I think what got me about the whole divorce thing. When growing up, I saw my dad was an alcoholic. My mum used to regularly, and it wasn't domestic abuse, it was domestic violence, would regularly get beaten up. We used to go to weddings where mum would, put a cardigan on, cover her scars, just so people couldn't see. And then people would come up to us and say, "Where's your dad?" And again, as a family, you'd kind of lie and live a double life and be like, "Oh, he's at work." So every time anybody asks, "Gampea," and all of a sudden they had this image of my dad being this hardworking guy providing for his family, but nobody knew the truth, what was going on behind closed doors. And again, we got a pet talk before we went to any wedding. You don't let anybody know what's going on in the household. You keep it private. So you almost led a double life from a very young age. Then and again, when she went through a divorce, naturally people cut her off, didn't even know what was happening behind closed doors, what she'd gone through for years of abuse. 14 years of abuse my mum went through. And not one person on the road that we lived on ever came up and said, "Are you okay? Do you need any support?" But if anything, I remember going to the Gurdwara when we were younger, and she got pointed at that she's a divorcee. And I remember when I went to get my GCSE grades, and my mum just asked us to pop to the Gurdwara to do Matha Tekana, which we did. As we went in, this auntie comes up and again criticising, and it was very much, "Oh, you guys don't come to the Gurdwara because your mum doesn't come to the Gurdwara. So where's your Sikhi?" And it was things like that, and I was just like shocked. And when I went through my divorce in 2009 was when I separated, and I didn't get divorced officially until 2012. That's like 8 years ago. And the way people responded to me, and I thought that was because of the 90s, and my mum wasn't educated or the community wasn't aware about it. I was quite surprised how many people were like, even the younger generation, I think more than even the elders. Some of the elders actually learned to understand because they've realized now through their life experiences, and they want to have that change of behavior. But I found it more ignorant from the younger generation. And the judging of, they wanting to know what happened rather than how you are. And are you okay? Yeah. So for me, I was really surprised. And do you know what? That's where I think the really bit that really kind of, as a Punjabi word, they say jubbi si gal. And I thought, my mother has given away a daughter, and with dignity and respect, I've held my relationship in that marriage. Nobody knows what happened between closed doors in my marriage and the struggles I went through as a woman. Naturally, people just finger pointed at me saying, I must have the fault in me because A, my mum's a divorcee, and B, I'm a divorcee. So it really hurt. And that's when I made the decision, actually, I'm going to write about this and also share my mum's story and the sacrifices my mum made and my nanny made, because these women have silenced their voices. And this is where I really want to break the pattern in generations before me of speaking out. Because if we don't break that cycle, how are we going to educate the future generation?
Absolutely.
It's so important. So, and if I had a daughter, I wouldn't want my daughter to go through that. So, as for the next generation, maybe my own child, my own bloodline, my nephews or nieces or someone, I wanted to break that cycle and bring education about. And I remember when I went to do it, my mum was really nervous. And I remember her saying to me once, "Look, Nikki, and you know what? The funny thing is we worry about the community so much, but this community doesn't even contribute to our bills or anything. But when we're doing great, everybody wants to know you. But when we're down at the dump, nobody wants to know you." So when I came home, nobody wanted to know me. And now, because I've been recognized, I've won all these awards, I do all these talks in these professional buildings with professionals. all of a sudden I'm like the best thing ever. And it's like they actually acknowledge me at weddings and functions, or they've come up to my mum to say, that's your daughter that's doing this now. But why
Yeah.
wasn't I the same girl recognized 10 years ago when I went through the hardship? Why is it taken for me to change my circumstances, believe in myself, believe what my mother did was right 30 years ago for the better of her 4 children, and believe what my nan had sacrificed for her daughters to have a better quality of life in England. And, kind of, they've sacrificed so much for me to have the life I have today. And this is where I'm very grateful, and I'm proud and able to say that I can share their journey. And, I'm working on another project, again, relate to my mum and my nanny's stories. And I think it's so important to celebrate women's voices, especially women that, they never had an education. They never had the experience I've had in my life, and be able to travel abroad, live abroad, and live outside before marriage as well. The freedom and the trust. And I remember my mum saying this to her, and to uni, sab to vaddi cheez I can give you, and I will translate this in English, is yaqeen and trust. You break that, you've lost everything.
Yeah.
So, why would I disrespect anyone at my in-laws' home if I didn't do it at my mum's house or do anything wrong? Because naturally, women are carrying their honor with them. But, as soon as something has tarnished it, you're not seen as worth as anything.
Yeah. Oh, I have my own issues with that, how we become the bearers of honor, right? And the
Yeah.
men can do whatever they want. But I'm grateful for the things that you've shared with us. I can imagine it's not easy. The reason I was smiling in between, because I see so many similarities in our stories.
Yeah.
And our years line up. So I was separated in 2009, and my divorce went through in 2012.
Oh my God, okay.
Like the same
Yeah,
year.
because we separate. But this is what I mean. And a lot of people were quite surprised. It wasn't just I just separated, like I said. I think this is another thing that as a community we need to do when two couples have decided to part, question, can you make it work? So we went through marriage
Yeah.
counseling, we went through mediation with the family, do things if you can to save a relationship.
Yeah.
Because sometimes if you learn something where as an individual you've made mistakes, because each of us had made certain mistakes into that relationship failing. And if you take accountability and responsibility for your own actions and move forward with that change, you can make something work. But if you're going to not do that and then do the finger pointing within the community and to make someone look and belittle someone, to have this ego, I don't get that. And I also found, I don't know if this is just an observation for myself, but a lot of men that come out of a relationship get married quicker than women do. And then it's that there's a fault with a woman, not the guy, because she's still not yet married.
Yeah.
Yet
Hi.
in my mum's generation, and yet in my mum's generation, my mum, again, being, that kind of Punjabi mentality of, I only marry once, I'm committed to one man, I'm never going to get married, I'm going to sacrifice my life for my kids. What has that got her? And by doing and again, community and society still knocked her down. And even if she's done everything by the book and done it well and brought her kids up, there's still someone ready to knock you down.
The thing is, they were made
They're a
with
silent generation with sacrificing, and all they needed to do was sacrifice.
I don't know. I mean, I think sacrifice is, I mean, I understand why you're using that word. For me, the strength of those women is incomparable. Like, I look at my mom, and she was in a marriage which was abusive from the beginning, and she suffered more than 30 years of domestic abuse from the moment she walked into the door. Very close until my father actually passed away, right? And it was alcohol abuse, it was domestic violence, and the police were like, we were on first name basis
Regularly. Yeah. Same thing here.
She has the same qualities that you're talking about of your mother. So it's that education that was in that generation, and their level of loyalty towards their parents, and that respect was a whole other level that we can't comprehend. I'm born and raised in the UK, so I've got a mixture of those values. I've got my Punjabi values, right? And then I've got my British values as well. And I couldn't see things from my mum's angle. And in my younger years as a teen, I thought she was weak. I thought that she was just being submissive and not looking for a way out. We begged and pleaded her to leave, but she wouldn't. didn't believe in divorce. And it wasn't until later in my life that I realized the amount of strength that it takes. Like we all have a different path. And I judged her a lot for making those choices then, because I thought as a child I knew better. That's my neighbour's dog, so please enjoy
That's
the sound
okay.
effect. um, I thought that I knew better than my mother in that time period, and that she wasn't putting her children first. And I thought it was unfair. It wasn't
But if
until,
anything, she was putting you guys more in front and putting your thought, your feelings and how it's going to impact you as children.
but I didn't realize that until later. And then I was like, wow, I don't have that same strength as my mother. I have a different strength, but I don't have that same strength that she
Yeah.
has. And it's just, I think it's appreciating the education of different generations, and we stand in a different space. We have the opportunity to create something new. And officially, as of today, you are part of Core Voices, because the work that you're doing is the same work that we're trying to do here in this small little community of ours, is to talk about hard hitting issues that we need to unveil, and
Yeah.
we need to correct those patterns. We need to make spaces safe. We need to make it dignified. For if a man can be divorced in our community and still be treated with respect, why can a woman not? I mean, I, as you know, work in the space of Kirtan and a lot in
Yeah.
Gurdwara. I'm very immersed in the Punjabi and Sikh community. When people found out that I got divorced, the first reaction was, oh, Sachi?
Gee,
Oh,
and don't
people.
you find they do it like someone's died, and it's
Yes.
like they're doing it of source.
Yes.
And so I found that really shocking, because it was
And
like
then,
they'll come on and they'll go, "Oh, Sachi Banji, pick up the way I see," and they want the grunchy details rather than ask how you are, if you're
right.
even okay
Right.
as
So
a
then I
human
never
being.
got asked that. Never got asked that. The follow-up question was it because you travel so much? We thought
I had
I
that.
was like, are you kidding? Like, really? Are you kidding? I chose not to converse further than that. I
No,
was just like,
no, best
some
way.
of them I would just say yes, just to shut them up and be done with it, because it was too much, you know?
Yeah.
When you go through that, it hits you so many ways. Like for me, it really hit my confidence. My circumstances
Yes.
in my marriage were different. Um, I was, okay, maybe this is the first time I say that. This is the moment that I share this with the world. Um, I was in a marriage where all he wanted was a passport, and I didn't know that. So he was from India. Once he got his residency, he was gone. Like he just flew. That's it. Never saw him again till this day. And it was devastating for me. It was heartbreaking. It hurt my confidence. It hurt my self-esteem. It hurt everything. And it's been a long time now, right? But the healing that it
Because
takes for a woman's heart, because we take it personally. Men just like brush it off and they pick up the next new toy and like, okay, let me move on. Do you know what I mean? And I
but
think that
also
that's not recognized.
don't you find as well, like, anyone that's going into it genuinely, not saying that a lot of people aren't, but they are, no one gets married to get divorced.
Yes.
That's another thing. So, when you acknowledge that, and I remember the amount of times got asked those questions, and I was like, in my head, I was thinking, what do you lot think? How I got married to get divorced? Because nobody has that vision. No one has that thought process when they're getting married. Even if there's struggles or there's problems at the beginning, you tend to think to yourself, you're going to work through them. They're just little, they're just little processes on your way to your journey of marriage. And it's okay, but how much can you brush under the carpet until
Mhm.
you're at a breaking point yourself? So when I used to get that, I used to be thinking, do you think I went into this knowing I was planning to get divorced? And I think that's the thing that hurts. And people want to know the reason why you got divorced, but nobody, even like with yourself there, that's still not acceptable. He made a decision not to treat that marriage, and treat an undercarriage as a union where you guys have made a commitment to each other and walk away from his responsibility. But it's okay for him to do that. But if it was the other way around, it'd be seen completely different.
Yeah, but I mean, even in this situation, people still found a way to turn it around on me.
Yeah,
And I basically stopped talking to those people. And
yeah,
I got to the point where now when people ask me and I say I'm happily divorced, they don't know
yes.
how to take that. They're like,
Can you be
oh,
happy?
yeah. They were like, "ਹੁਣ ਫਿਰ ਤੂੰ ਵਿਆਹ ਦਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਸੋਚਿਆ? ਹੁਣ ਤੂੰ ਵਿਆਹ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਨਾ?" And I'm like, that's my choice. When and if I ever choose that again, firstly,
To
once bitten, twice shy, right? Been there, done that, not quite interested. Just, I don't know what the future holds, but that's not my driving force in life. Do you know what I mean? And I
yeah.
think that's the other thing that we need to change in our young women in Punjabi and Sikh spaces. It becomes like that's the thing you do when you're checking the boxes. You go through high school, or you go through primary school, high school, you get to university, you check the box, you get a good job, you check the box, now you got to get married, check the box, you got to have kids, check the box.
Box.
Why?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah. See,
Why?
I feel like in the last decade, I've had the best life I've had. I've achieved a lot more because I've lived life on my own terms. And I remember when I came home, I said, I did it your way, which was the arranged marriage way. And now I'm doing it my way. And my family have accepted that. And I've got to say, there were family members that stood beside me, took my side. And, you know, those people I'm never going to forget. So even when I ended up 2 years ago winning the Asian Women Award for social humanitarian category, and I remember, so when I started this journey, like I said, I wanted 1% and I got far more than what I bargained for. And when I got recognised for that award, I got on that stage and the first person I obviously had to thank was my mum. My mum, my mum Miji, who pulled me out of it. And, when you look at these people that have stood beside you, acknowledge them and acknowledge even the friends that have been there and still accepted you for the person you are goes a long way.
Mm.
And you'll only have probably a handful of those people in your life because the rest of people are just there to find out the gossip, the details. And, again, I had a friend that said to me, I can't talk to you anymore because you're a divorcee now. And the
What?
impact it's going to have on me. And, it's like, I didn't even realize you can catch a divorce like a flu. So I actually was like, I was shocked. So I walked away from that friendship. And again, years later, when I published the book, I got a message in my inbox appear on my social media. I just chose not to open it because I've grown as a person so much today. I'm a different person. Through my journey, I've evolved and become the person I am. That I have no resentment to anyone that ever spoke little to me or thought I was not going to be able to get where I am today. I say one thing that's got me as far as it has, and it is my Guruji, because that's one thing I think I'm really thankful to my nanny and my mum that Bart's been part of my journey, and I do get up and do my Bart every day, and I feel where you've got nobody else with you, and if you've got God with you, that's enough. Guruji with you, that will just take you far enough. So again, I want to, when I went on to get my first, like I was saying earlier, when I got launched with EY Sikh Network, I was very grateful it was with the Sikhi community, because when we were younger, we broke away from that, going to the Gurdwara, and then I had to form a relationship with the Sikh community, with build bridges with other communities to educate them and to raise the awareness of what goes on within our community and the issues that I'm covering in my book, and build a relationship with the police force, build a relationship with charities. You're building relationships to raise awareness widely to a wider audience for people to understand that this kind of behavior goes on. How do you deal with it? How do you break the pattern? How do you move forward in life? And that, again, comes all with
Absolutely.
education.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yes, education. How do we educate everybody? How can we fix it all, right? And I think your book is a great starting place, because for so many people, and I find this every week in the show, that there's so many people who are unaware of these issues because they might be fortunate enough to never have encountered them in their personal lives.
Mm-hmm.
They might be surrounded by people who might have suffered in silence. So, if that's the case, reach out to people and try to talk, try to provide support. Or they can reach out to people like yourself or Core Voices, where we actually. So, I'm a Sikh music therapist. And the reason I chose that path was because I saw the suffering, I saw the pain, I went through it in my own childhood, I saw it in my mother and people around me. And I wanted to help alleviate that pain. So using Sikh music therapeutically is what helped me, and that's what I take into different spaces. So I think that there's a lot of tools out there that we can reach to, and a lot of great organizations, like you mentioned, the Sharan Project, Hannah. And I want people to connect with you. So
Yeah.
I'm going to drop your website in. It's www.kalbirbains.com. It's KalbirBains.com. Reach out and support follow on social media as well, on all social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, the works. This is when we come together as communities, how we show up. And those of you that are listening and have not ordered your book yet, go over to Amazon and order Not Our Daughter right now, in this moment. I want you to do that, because we have to support good work. We have to talk about these things. And one of the things, or a couple of the things that have been on my mind that I'd love to get your opinion on, is looking at the current climate where we are in COVID. You mentioned earlier about the rise in domestic abuse in homes. What can we do, and how can this be addressed for people who are in those situations?
Just having regular contact for a start with someone that is, if you know that someone's in an abusive relationship, regularly checking with them. It doesn't have to be where you have a phone call conversation. You could be dropping them a text, check they're okay, how are they getting on. If they want to talk, whenever they're ready or they've got time to talk, they want to contact you, that you are available. As long as you're assuring that person that you're there, not like physically there, but you're there. But when they need time to pick up the phone, let's say they have a moment away from their family and they decide, actually, I want to make that phone call and just have a chat with someone, let them know what's going on within my home. That's so important right now, because there's been loads of ways where people can even do Zoom meetings at work, let their managers know. So if you're working and you've got stuff going on at home and you feel you need someone professional to talk to, let one of your co-workers know, managers know, a family member, a friend, somebody that can at least have that information to a side and check in on you and check you're okay. Because I think as a community, we're brought up where let's not talk about it, but there may be somebody at the time when I was going through everything I was going through, because I had gone through a bit of abuse as well. I had a best friend that I was talking to. So I didn't want my family to know anything, because I didn't want to hurt my mom, because I know her heart would break to find out that her daughter's going through what she'd gone through years ago. So I had a best friend that I regularly checked in with, let her know how I was doing. And I think those little things will make such a difference to someone's life. You don't even realize how much that person just being there, listening. But when you're ready to make the call or take an action, that person will be there to help you and support you to make that call. But also charities, look into reaching out to any charities, any helplines you can reach out to. So you've got the Sharan Project, Common Abad is another one. ICRA, which is a Kurdish charity, and then you've got South or Black Sisters. And all of them have like open surgery days. They have a time slot on their website. You can even have a look at the websites to see when they have availability for people to make phone calls in. So you've got, these are professional charities, as well as you have got the police force also have a telephone line as well, because the government have been putting out a national number. So with COVID happening right now, what's happened is you've got a lot of people within homes with confined space. And if there was abuse or say a bit of tension happening beforehand, it's been amplified a lot more now because of the current climate we're in. So, you've got, even when the family that gets on, probably finding it difficult because they're all in each of the spaces and you're not so used to being in each of those pockets. So it's just, taking that time out to go for a walk, take the kids out, have a break. Also remember, when you have got a problem going on, try not to do it in front of the kids. And this is something I would say, being a child from an abusive background, there's a high possibility that your child would go through abuse and repeat it, 68% chance, because they're witnessing, even if it's verbal abuse, physical, mental, a child is more likely to fall into that abuse by 68%, just because they're witnessing that going on around them. So I'm not saying I'm condoning it, but I'm just saying, as parents or as couples in front of children, try not to have those conversations around kids, because I know the psychological impact it's had on me later on in my life as a child, where it did have. And if I'd known the statistics then, I think I would have done a lot of, like, I went through counselling afterward and I healed and I understood behaviour patterns and things like that, which I would have done a lot more earlier in my 20s if I'd known the statistics. Until after I went through my divorce and do my research for my book, I found out this, how it has an impact. And this is where I think I'm more mindful, if I'm around kids, what kind of conversations you have around kids, what are healthy, what are not healthy conversations, what shouldn't be discussed in front of them. And I think that's something really important. And again, Kids being on social media right now is another one where, parents checking in to see what sites they're on, because there's a massive high, you've got a lot of things going on with paedophile trafficking as well. That's worldwide, globally, which, is another risk. So I think it's just even parents being more aware with what's happening to their kids out there as well, and what social media can have an impact on them. Because you've got to remember, I'm an 80s child and I didn't grow up with social media. So I'm able to control how much I have, being on social media and not being on social media. But whereas the younger generation now, for them, it's all about connecting with their friends, and being within confined spaces. It's doing their homework on social. So you've got more opportunity of these kids not even discussing with their parents with what's going on. So you've got that aspect of it, as well as parents, if there's abuse going on at home. And also, you've got to bear in mind, for kids, schools, if there was abuse going on at home, is a safe space.
Yeah.
It's a space to disappear. Because it was for us, that's what it was for me, and it was almost living a double life. So how many of those kids are now constantly in that space would be harder as well.
Yes, absolutely. I think you've raised a lot of valid points. There's so many things that you've talked about today that I would love to dive deeper into, and I feel I'm going to have you back. You were talking earlier about dowry and marriages, and I know a lot of people who have still, continued to have their Anand Karij take place during COVID, and going from the 500 people massive wedding to the small 20 or 30
Intimate
people.
weddings. Yeah. I'm all for that, because originally that's what I wanted. I wanted a very small private wedding, and I didn't end up having that. I ended up having a wedding which I kept compromising for the boy side, and it ended up getting bigger and bigger. And it wasn't the kind of wedding I wanted. I just think right now, with what's happening with COVID, it's making people also question what's important. The two of them joining in union with 30 guests, which are your, immediate family, your loved ones. And if your loved ones understand, they'll be happy to know that you're married and you can party whenever. And I think for a lot of people, it's all about the partying, and weddings have been getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then over the time, I have seen them getting very intimate as well, with guests being up to 150 to 200, 300 probably. And, but I think it's nicer that we're bringing it back to the basics.
Yes.
And it is focusing on the Ananda Karaj. It is focusing on that one moment, and getting the couple to understand what it's all about. And also your journey afterwards, where your marriage really starts. You know that, I know that, and it's not about that one day. So if we put that one day aside and get them to focus on, so well done to everyone that's had a COVID wedding. If I was in a relationship, I would have run down the aisle. It would have been the perfect time. Because I just think, what? Have your loved ones there and just keep it simple. And when I hear about, because when I wrote a little chapter about how when my mum and dad got married, and again, they had a small intimate affair. And it was, do you remember back in the 80s, everybody got together and pulled together. So the bunde were one house, bunny were at the other house. You had, all the food was cooked from home. Mithai was done from home a week before. It was a very, like a community get together feel. Wasn't now. It's how much have we paid? How many people? Guests, forget 500. You'll even have guests up to 15 to 2,000 guests. And I just think they're getting bigger and bigger. And I've known people that have had very big weddings, or the show thing, or they've gone intimate, but they've still had spent quite a bit. And in the UK, an average Indian wedding overall, Asian wedding, is 50,000 to 250,000. Yeah.
What?
Yes.
Are you kidding me?
Seriously, right now? No, honestly.
What?
50,000 to 250,000. And one of the most expensive lenge that were made, all completely Swarovski stones. I think it was 30,000 from Soho Road.
Oh my God. Sorry, that I just did the eye roll there, because
I think it just, that's what I mean. I think it's ridiculous. And the fact we've got, I think COVID's, yes, and COVID's happened, and it's got a lot of people I've had cousins recently who've got married during COVID, and when I've seen their pictures and I've seen the focus, again, it comes back to the basics, and compliments have been basic, where look how beautiful they look together, look how stunning she looks, because you still can look amazing without having 1,000 guests at your wedding, because it's now bringing a focal point on the two of you having an intimate affair with the people you love in that room, who are there for you through your good and your bad. Because let's face it, when you have 550 to, I don't know, 1,200 to 2,000 guests, how many of those people are going to be in your life, really? You know, you've got to, and you won't even get 5 people stand next to you.
Oh, none of them. They all flee.
So, yeah,
Yeah,
so that's what I mean. I think getting people to go back to basic, and for me, I personally think it's the best thing that's happened.
yeah.
And I think anyone that's postponed their wedding till next year, fair enough, you're allowed to have a choice and do that. And you want, everybody wants something different. That's understandable. But personally, I think it's going back to our roots and getting us to understand what's important.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. And I guess this is a great moment for me to share that I perform Anand Karaj for a lot of friends at the moment. And I'll take the traditional Sikh instruments and sing Kirtan in Rag to give a wholesome experience of what it would have felt like back in the day when you listen to
Yes.
that music. Yeah. And one of the key components of the work that I do in that space is to work with the couple for a period of at least 6 months before the Anand Karaj to go through different layers of support individually and together to find out the purpose. Like, why do they want to get married? What does it mean to them? What are they expecting? And what does the day of the Anand Karaj mean to them? Building that connection, taking them through that process, as well as then going deep into the shabads that will be sung that day, the lama, and any of the shabads that will be sung, so that there's a connection. On that day, the day of the Anand Karaj, is those two souls individually making a commitment to Guru, but witnessing each
Yep.
other's commitment and then being there in support of each other's journey, because that is what Anand Karaj means.
It is.
Mhm.
But
And
a lot of people don't know that. See, this is
mm,
the thing that shocks me when you get talking to even the younger generation and even my generation. I remember when I was getting married, a lot of people don't know that. They don't even know what each of their lam even mean, like
yeah,
what each lama means and represents. And at the
so-
end of it, when they give you a shruppa and they give you a gotka, and they say that Guruji is the center of your life. Anything happens, come to Guruji. But a lot of people, again, once they're married, yes, they'll have part functions, they'll attend the Gurdwara. But how many of them do they really turn to the Guruji?
so I agree with you, but I think that we've been fortunate in the era that we grew up in. We were given maybe a stronger connection with Gurbani and Guru
Yeah,
Granth Sahib Ji. I don't think that that's been passed on in the generations after that.
generations below.
And I think that this is a great way to address that. That originally that's how it used to be. That's what we were taught, that you make that connection, um, and we can recreate that. We can have better support, and it's why you do the work that you do and I do the work that I do, because we see that there's a need for it. We need to have that support. We need to keep the Anand. If we're going to have the Anand Karaj, then we need to keep it Guru centered and know that
Yes.
that's the wisdom we need for the rest of our lives. And all the money, the excess that we waste, that could go to doing so much good in the world. There are so many people suffering in different ways that need that support. And we're supposed to be a calm of giving, of looking after
Yeah,
others. Not We're not here for an ego trip to say, oh, I've got so much money. Hey, come and look, my daughter's wedding is bigger than your daughter's wedding. Why couldn't you do this? You couldn't afford it. Oh, I can afford it.
I
Right?
did. Yeah.
We have to snap out of that nonsense. We've got to step into this. And I love what you said, that the intimate weddings now happening during COVID
Yeah.
are actually a blessing. And
Yeah. And
I
it's so
think,
lovely because even through social media, you can still see your cousins are getting married, your family friends are getting married, and you're still congratulating. You're still part of their journey. Yes, you're not there present, but you're just as happy. Fair enough, you're not partying for 2-3 hours on a dance floor with them, but you're just as happy for them, and also to see that they've actually moved on in the next chapter in their life, and you know also it's kept it simple and focused on the two of them to enjoy that day, to
yeah,
start their journey as a married couple, and
yeah.
that you will be a part of that journey and meet them as friends or family members and connect with them. And I think it's, if you genuinely care about someone, you'll have that connection regardless.
Absolutely, absolutely. Oh, I love this. So, anybody who's tuning in, if you want to know more about the Anand Karaj, if you're thinking to get married or you're looking for some guidance and support, you can drop me an email, corevoices@gmail.com. And we make that connection, make it deeper, make it mean something more. And on that note,
I
we'll do.
think it's also amazing that you're doing, sorry, the fact you're doing that course where it's for 6 months and getting the couple to understand why are they getting married, what does it mean to them, because a lot of people go into the idea of marriage, they don't realize what responsibilities they have to go through. And there's got to be give and take on both sides. There has to be compromises done on each side, but a lot of people will go in assuming that they're going to get it their way. And or it's going to be, like, for instance, like when you were just saying earlier that you'd gone through a marriage where he knew that once he's got a visa he's leaving, or it's the case where so like myself, when I got married, I'd gone through a number of issues in my marriage, which I've written about in my book, and it got to a breaking point that I had to eventually leave. And it gets to that point. Really think about it. It's not an easy decision. It's a life-changing decision, and it's not just a life-changing decision for two people, it's for two families. And when a marriage breaks, two families break.
Yeah.
You're giving heartache to both sides. And I remember how much it shattered my mum, and not just my mum, even the extended family, like how everybody felt about it. So everybody feels that pain, so don't take it lightly. Think about it and really connect and make the effort. And the fact you do that for 6 months, I think that's brilliant. Something that we really need more and more of.
Thank you, Kalbir. This has been wonderful, and we've come to the end of the show, and I'd like to ask you if you have a message to leave with our beautiful Core Voices community.
Think about how you can break a cycle and bring about education going forward. It's so important, and it's not just almost normalizing when we say taboo subjects as real conversations, and let's start introducing them as conversations that need to go on within our homes, that we can then allow the next generation before us to not have it as hard as we've had it, or the generations before us. We can bring about that change. So just think about how you want to be the change through education, basically. Bring that about and think how you can quantify that.
Beautiful. Thank you, Kalbir. Thank you. It's been such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you.
I'm excited for you to be back, because there's still like a ton of questions in my head for all of the things that we talked about: gender equality, child marriage, all of these things, things that we need to delve into and talk about more. So please come back soon. And welcome also to the Core Voices community,
Definitely
because you are now a permanent member. But really, sincerely, thank you so much for sharing all of this.
And thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.